So 7th grade, I get in a fight with one of my teammates, another point guard. Never really liked each other, whatever, doesn't really matter. We got in a fight, we're in the hallway, and the fight doesn't escalate to many like punches or anything. We're kind of just pushing each other. Some teachers see, but a cop runs darts in our direction and only goes for me, only pulls me, and doesn't just pull me and separates me. He takes my 110, 20-pound body and slams it against the locker, and nothing happens to the dude I was fighting, Richard, who was a white dude, and I am one of the darker Mexicans on campus in a neighborhood that's historically white and rich, and I was at a new school. And in the moment, didn't know really what to think besides don't touch me, someone's touching me, so I resist a little bit, and he tells me I'm resisting arrest, and I'm like, I didn't know I was under arrested. And I'm just and like I don't have the words to describe my curiosity or my frustration or my pain, but all I see is Richard just safely standing watching me, and I'm just like, where are the teachers at? Why aren't the teachers saying anything? And maybe it's one of those, looking back on it, they too were just shocked and caught up in the moment, or they didn't feel like they could advocate for me or didn't care to advocate for this situation, couldn't read it the way I read it because all of them were predominantly white. So that's just something that always stuck with me, stuck in my mind as impacted the way that I perceive the police. I don't feel safe when I see the police. That's not.
When I was 8 years old, I moved from San Antonio, a pretty big city, a diverse place, to Fredericksburg, which is a predominantly white community. I attended private school where I was the only person of color in my school, in my class, and I vividly remember the first time somebody told me I was black. I had no idea what that meant. I didn't even have this concept of race or what that meant for the rest of my life. But a boy I didn't even like made a comment to a friend that he would never date a black person. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? So I went home and I had the conversation with my dad. I'm biracial, so my mom is white and my dad is black. And we had a conversation at the dinner table about what black was, what blackness is, what blackness is not, and how, as the only person of color that a lot of these people have been exposed to, I was going to be the only interaction they had, so I had to be on my absolute best behavior. There was no room for making mistakes. There was no room for any sort of wrongdoing. I had to represent this entire race of people.
Cool. So one time when I was in middle school, I think I was in 7th or 8th grade, when my friends came up to me, my friend was white, and he asked me, he said, "Why is the Mexican Olympic team weak?" And I said, "I don't know, why?" And then he said, "Well, that's because all the Mexicans that can swim, run, or jump are already in the US." And then he starts cracking up. He thinks it's the funniest thing. And I'm sitting there thinking, wait a second, I'm Mexican, my grandparents are Mexican. At some point, my family crossed over to the United States, and this person is not only being, I felt like he was being super racist, but also just hurtful. And the way that it affected me into my adult life is feeling like white people think Mexicans are less than them. That's what it made me feel like. And that's just kind of stuck with me and always brought some bit of confusion.
My first year in the United States, I was in the 7th grade. And down the road, they had a community center. And I was walking down from school to the community center with a friend of mine, Michael. And we were walking, and I remember a pickup truck drove by with a Confederate flag, and they're screaming. And I didn't understand it at the time. I had just moved to America, so I wasn't as educated on, KKK and things of that nature. So as we're walking down, Michael turns and looks at me because he had heard what was said and was paying attention. He goes, "Are you offended? Like, are you okay?" And I remember looking at him and saying, what? They love their country, you know? Because I didn't know what the Confederate, he, you know, as we're walking, he was talking to me about it. You know, those guys were screaming the N-word, and, you know, they were saying, go back to your country, and so on and so forth. And I remember going home that day and spending hours doing all this research on Ku Klux Klan and the KKK and the N-word and how detrimental it is to American society, in particular African American people. And I remember coming to school the next day and just being super depressed. You know, I came to school, I was very to myself. That always stuck with me, that there's a lot of ignorant people that exist. You know, I think coming to America, I assumed everything was roses and butterflies and the streets were gold and everything was wonderful, but it was that moment that I realized that there are terrible people all over the world, and that some people, for no reason, you know, think it's cool to say or act in ways that are extremely disrespectful and hurtful. And
I mean, I've been called the N-word, even though I am not black, just brown enough to be called that. And it's not really a word that's just for black people. I mean, it is, but it's made for you to feel less than human. Meant to make you feel like you don't deserve to be, like you deserve to be treated less. But I got pulled over by the police officer, by cops, with my friends, and my two friends were black, and they treated my friends much differently than they treated me. And some of those cops were Latinos, and they were light-skinned Latinos. And, you know, it isn't just in America, but all across the world where darker people get treated differently by authority. And even though I'm dark, I'm not as dark, so I didn't get treated as poorly. And then one was a male, one was a female, and my female friend, who takes on like a masculine persona, was treated really horribly. Her hair was dragged, and I mean, it makes me tear up a little bit, honestly, thinking about it, just because never really seen anything like that face to face, and just felt so helpless to do anything about it. So it's still frustrating, because I know that it still happens, and it's still going to happen until we have more progressive police training in all parts of the country and society.
So an experience I had as an adult that affected how I perceive myself as a person of color, as a black woman, was actually in the recent past. I had just started dating my boyfriend. He also grew up in a predominantly white community, but I've already become accustomed to almost always being the only black person in the room. So one night we were at his friend's house. It was a big group of us. We were at a party, and one of his friends said the N-word, not to me, but just said it, not understanding how that would feel, how that affected me. And you felt the room kind of stand still. Everybody all of a sudden looked at me, and I've had that experience my whole life, right? Like being the only black person in history classes when we're talking about slavery and civil rights. So being the only person in the room that word applied to, and then saying it in passing and not understanding what that meant to me. To make matters worse, I was very visibly upset. I was crying, I was in tears, and I went upstairs to take a cool down moment. My boyfriend came upstairs to comfort me, and his friend was leaving. He turned around and said it in like a friendly way that just kind of sent me over the edge, because here's somebody that like I love, somebody that I genuinely care about, who's using this word, not understanding what it means to me as a black person, not understanding the historical context around that word and what it's meant for so many people. So you know, this isn't what you asked, but this is why I think it breaks my heart to hear these kids use this word. I know you don't know what you're saying. I really hope that this program encourages you to learn more about it. But know that whether or not you mean it in a hurtful way, like there are people that hear that take it in a hurtful way.
Something else that happened in my adult life right after college, I was dating a girl who was white, and she had blue eyes, and she was looking at my eyes one day, and she asked me, "What color are your eyes?" And I was like, "Oh, my eyes are brown." And she was like, "Oh wow, you have poop-colored eyes." And I was thinking, wait a second, what? And she was like, "Yeah, your eyes are pretty, but," she's like, "I want my kids to have blue eyes. Blue eyes are so beautiful." And if we think about this sentiment and this feeling of why blue eyes are important, it goes all the way back to World War II, and why people who were Jewish were killed, or people who didn't have blonde hair, blue eyes were killed. And this is still this day when people are still thinking that blue eyes are what define somebody of a higher hierarchy, or somebody of a higher social class, or a better race. Just because you have blue eyes means you're better than somebody who has brown colored eyes.
You know, in my adult life, I remember I was living in California. I was going to Santa Barbara City College at the time, and we were out and about, and we were talking, and a older white gentleman walked past me as he was probably eavesdropping on our conversation, and he walked past me and goes, "You're really intelligent for a black kid." And I remember my jaw dropped, and you know, you get that feeling, you know, where your body gets hot and you start to tremble because you're so angry. And it was a group of us. I was at the time president of the city college BSU, which is Black Student Union. I was the president of it, so we were having conversations about various things that was going on in the world. At the time, President Obama was, it was 08, he was going for his first term, so we were having that conversation. He was coming to visit the school and to give a speech, so, you know, we're having all this conversation, and he walked by and he goes, "You're really intelligent, or you're really smart for a black kid." And I remember being so angry because, you know, the layer to that, why can't I just be smart or have a extensive vocabulary simply because I study and I work hard and I do my best to educate myself, because education was pushed by my parents through everything. Why can't it just be that? Why does it have to be this caveat that you're smart or intelligent for a black kid? You know, as if black kids or African American kids aren't just inherently smart. You know, so I remember looking at him, and I didn't dignify it, and I just walked away. And everybody kept asking me, why didn't I say anything? Why didn't I do anything? And I remember in that moment thinking, if I acted on how I felt right now, I will only give him the satisfaction that he was looking for. So if I acted angry or mad or threw a fit or acted outrageous, it'll only reinforce whatever negative stereotype he had of me as a young black man. So I just walked away and said, "You know what, thanks for your compliment," and I walked away. You know, and I left it at that. That's not to say I wasn't angry, because I was very angry. But I remember walking away and saying, I'm not gonna make somebody who's not important. You know, he's not important to me in any sense of the word, so I'm not going to sit here and engage in a conversation with an ignorant person. It's best for me to walk away, and that's what I did. But I remember, again, that stuck with me because all my friends were African American, highly intelligent, far more intelligent than me, you know. But for him to say that about a group of people sitting down engaging in a conversation, that you guys or you are really smart, you know, for a black kid, I thought that was really, really offensive. And unfortunately, that is why I've always worked harder, because I just want to be smart, period. It shouldn't be you're smart for a woman, you're smart for a Hispanic kid. It's just you're smart, period, and leave it at that. So that has always reinforced this idea that as an unfortunate black man, I have to be twice as good to be seen as equal. And that, I think, has always lit the fire, you know, as far as work ethic, just work harder than the next person. You know, now that T6er, I joke with the kids all the time. I say, if you see me in a fight with the bear, pray for the bear, you know, because I'm gonna work that much harder. So.